Well, everybody, welcome back to the channel off the Underside. How we all doing? Tonight we've got our good friend back, Mr. Dan Bateman. How you doing, Dan?
Yeah, all good, mate. Thanks for having me back on. Looking forward to talking about this.
Aye, mate, it's something I wanted to speak to you about because I know that you've spoken about it a wee bit, and I think it's really, really important. It's a very important subject, especially in this day and age. Because I was reading some stats earlier on, and it's just absolutely frightening. The amount of people that are going through this and they don't speak about it, mate. So I know that you're brave enough to talk about it, mate. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, like I say, I think it's something like obviously the podcast I do, Be the Best Version of Yourself. We talk about, things that people don't generally talk about. We talk about hard hitting subjects and gambling addiction. My story in particular, obviously, we talk about quite often. And it's important to talk about these things because of all the addictions, gambling's called the silent one because. You can probably tell if someone's drinking a lot. You can probably tell if someone's taking a lot of drugs, but you wouldn't know walking past Joe Bloggs in the street if he'd just lost 50 grand on a horse or something like that. You wouldn't know. So it's important to talk about this.
That's it, mate. It's a silent addiction, they say, isn't it? So
Yeah.
as you say, when it comes to like alcohol and drugs and all that, you can tell, can't you? Someone's going through that kind of stuff. Whereas if somebody's, as you say, lost 50 grand, there's absolutely no way of telling that. So, aye, definitely, mate. But Dan, let's talk about your story, mate. Let's go back to when you're young. What do you remember? You maybe know your first bet. Do you remember the kind of the early stages of you betting?
Yeah, I remember, to be honest, I think it started when I was at school, if I'm honest. And I think, I don't know what you guys might call it, but we call it pitch and toss, where you're throwing 50 pence against the wall, things like that. So, like at school, you'd be like betting your dinner money on like who can get the closest to the wall. Some days you'd be like quids in and you'd have a tenner because you'd won everybody's money. And there'd be other days where you didn't have anything because you'd lost it. And I think it kind of stemmed from there. We used to go on our dinner breaks from school. We'd go to the shops over the road from the school. There'd be like fruit machines, things like that. We'd be in there playing on them, and just from there really. But my first bet, I think I was about 14, and I got my dad to put it on for me. Obviously, I wasn't old enough to go in the shop, and it won. But it wasn't that typical story that you hear. Someone goes, "Oh, I won a load of money to start with, and that's what got me hooked." Mine wasn't that. I think I won like £40. I remember the game. It was Man United 2, Portsmouth 1. I had Man United to win 2-1, and I think I had Kanu for Portsmouth to score first, something like that. And it was like it was just a good feeling. Like it wasn't about the money, it was just the feeling that it gave me that I was right and I won. And yeah, from there it just gradually got worse and worse.
So how did it escalate then, mate? Were you just getting out of the bookies yourself after that and placing bets?
Yeah, I mean, luckily for probably, I would say probably about the age of 15, 16, I've always been blessed with these youthful looks. So I never got ID'd anywhere or anything like that. So I could walk in pubs, clubs, I could walk in bookies. No one would bat an eyelid. The hairline was already going then as well. So, it was something that I found quite easy. And then I remember like priding myself on how quickly I could fill a betting slip in, how quickly you could fill them coupon sheets in, and things like that, and just being so quick with it. And it wasn't massive amounts to begin with. It was just bits and bobs. But once I started working and earning my own wage when I turned 16, I started working in a quick save. You might remember a quick save shop,
Oh,
Jamie. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Some of the younger viewers may not. Quick save was the original type Aldi type shop. Other shops are available. But yeah, it was the original like budget shop. I started working in there, and I was earning a good wage. I'd just left school, and I was like, right, I can get used to this. And just gradually over time, it got worse. And I would say it probably escalated to it being a real problem was when I got it on my phone, and it was handheld, and it wasn't about going to the shop anymore. It was about just doing it from the comfort of your own house.
So is there a particular moment, mate, that you can remember that you thought, this is turning into more than just a bit of fun?
Yeah, well, a couple of times to be honest, mate. I think there was a couple of times where I did reach out to my parents, my sister, and say, look, can you look after my finances because my gambling's just a bit out of control. But then I would find a way to get back to it. But there was a couple of times where I found myself betting on tennis at 3 a.m. in the morning. There'd be like South American football leagues on a Sunday night, whether it's the Venezuelan Premier League, anywhere in South America. I'd be up till 3 a.m., 4 a.m. betting on them. And I remember just thinking like, this is now bordering on a problem now, But then there was a couple of times where I managed to get it back on track. My money was being looked after. But the part that really frustrates me when I look back is I would always find a way to get that money back somehow. So, I'm not proud of it, but I would make lies up and say, oh, I need to buy some new shoes for work, or I need to buy some new trousers for work, or something like that. So I would get transferred this money back over, and then that money would just go on betting. And obviously, my mum or my sister or whoever that were controlling my finances at the time, they don't want to question it because it's like, well, he says he wants trousers. How low is he? Do we want him to think we don't trust him at all? Where because I know I'd be the same. I'm not going to question trousers for work. But that's how bad it got at one point. Like I was literally begging for like £30 just so I could bet on the football, saying that it was shoes for work and things like that. And to be fair, it was my money, so at the end of the day, I probably would have said, well, it's my money kind of thing, which again wasn't the whole purpose of me giving it to my family to look after. It was there for a reason. And then I remember in lockdown in COVID when there was no football to bet on, I thought this is a real chance now to, kick this habit. And so I did. I gave my money away again to my sister and my mum to look after. I remember saving like £1,000 in that couple of that first few months of lockdown. And I bought a new double bed for my bedroom. I was doing the house up and stuff. And then once football slowly started again, remember obviously in COVID, it was like they gradually brought it back. And then I started betting again. And again, it was just something that I thought, oh, it's not a problem. I'll only have a fiver here and there. But when you're someone like me, it's never just a fiver here and there.
Definitely, mate. I can totally relate to that. So was it always just football betting with you, Dan, or did it ever turn into anything else like casinos or anything like that?
I would dabble in the casino side of things because you'd often get like emails, or you've got 10 free spins, 20 free spins, all that kind of stuff. So I would dabble in it, but I would never say it interested me. Same as the fruit machines, same as the roulettes, things like that. So I was kind of fortunate in a way because them roulette machines are the worst. They are the worst. Like, obviously there's a limit on spins now, but at one point it was limitless spins, so you could have £100 spins, so you could have lost £1,000 in 2 minutes and not even batted an eyelid. Luckily for me, mine was sports betting, but it wasn't just football. I would bet on the tennis. I'd be betting on the cricket. I'd be betting on the next method. I don't know if you watch much cricket, Jamie, but I'd be betting on the next method of dismissal. So it'd be like LBW, caught behind. Uh, bowled, all that kind of stuff. And then tennis, it'd be who's just going to win the next point, who's going to win the first set. Rugby as well, sports that I enjoy watching, but I wouldn't necessarily associate with gambling. Different with football and horse racing, I think, and darts, because I think they are synonymous these days because of the sponsorships, because of the advertising. I would say they're the three sports that if you were watching it, you would probably have a bet on them because it's impossible not to. So for me, football was the main one because that was my main love and I enjoyed it. But it did take away my enjoyment. I physically couldn't sit on a weekend, watch the football, especially on like a Super Sunday. So say you've got a 12 o'clock game, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock. I physically couldn't have sat and watched any of those games without having a bet on them. I would have got itchy feet. I would have been, like getting anxious. I'd have been thinking, I'd have to get out of the house. And I remember at one point messaging my dad and getting my dad to put a bet on for me because my dad didn't know the extent of my addiction at the time because I was closer to my mum at the time and my mum and dad aren't together. So it was like I would say to my dad, "Oh, I fancy putting this bet on for me," because he likes a little dabble here and there, and he'd put it on for me and he wouldn't know. And I know even now, like he says, he feels bad and stuff. And I was like, yeah, but I would have. You become untrustworthy. I would say this with addiction, especially with the gambling one, because you don't know how to talk about it. You don't know how to share it with people. So you would be lying to people and be quite good at it. and it takes all your that trustworthiness out of you and all the integrity away from you. I said I feel like my gambling addiction really just took that part of me away with it, and it's took me a long time to even get a slight bit of that trust back.
Definitely, mate. And you don't realise what you're doing at the time, though. You don't realise the type of person that you are. Like I say, mate, I've been there. Everything that you're saying, I can relate to. I've done all that. I have done everything. I've lied to people. Luckily, my next question: I've never stole from anybody, mate. Have you ever? Did you ever go down that road?
No, never stole from anyone. All the money I lost was my own money. So in a way, again, when I look back with retrospect, I'm kind of lucky because you hear these stories, people robbing Peter to pay Paul. Don't get me wrong, I would lend money, but I would always pay it back. Like say it was getting to like end of pay month, it'd be getting to payday, maybe like the Wednesday, Thursday before the payday on the Friday. I'd be like, can I lend 20 quid off somebody? So I would lend it, but on the Friday, the first thing I would do would be giving that 20 quid back. I wouldn't think, oh, I'll just not pay them back type thing. So no, I never stole. The thing that I am most ashamed of is that I lied to the people that trusted me the most, just about what I was doing, where my money was going. I remember having numerous conversations with family members and friends. Like they'd be like, "We're going on holiday. Do you want to come?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I can't afford it." And they'd be like, "Dan, you work full time. Like what? Like why can't you afford it?" Things like that. And we talked earlier about telltale signs and stuff. And I remember when I first said I had a gambling addiction, and people said they were like, "Well, to be fair, you kind of know sometimes." And I said, "Well, how? What do you mean?" And they said it was because they always wear the same clothes. So like I always wear tracky bottoms, t-shirt, trainers, and it'd always be similar ones or the same ones. And someone said they were like, you're working full time. You say you've got no money. You don't go on holiday. You don't have trips away. You wear the same clothes or similar clothes all the time. It's like, where's your money going? It can only be going on something that you don't want people to know about. And when I thought about that, actually, that really made a lot of sense to me.
Wow, man. That I've never heard that one before, and that does make total sense. Total sense. You're saying you were kind of borrowing off people and stuff. Was it just family members and that, or did you ever take out loans or credit cards or anything like that?
Well, I had a credit card that I got because I was looking to buy a house at the time and I had no credit. When they tell you you've got to get a credit card, get your credit score up to get a house. So I got that. I literally bought my mum a new couch on the credit card and then I was just paying it off. It never entered my head at any point to think, oh, I could gamble with this. And then I remember the specific game that it was Man United, Liverpool. I think it was Jose Mourinho was in charge. Man United won 2-0. It was that game when Rashford turned Trent Alexander-Arnold inside out and stuff. And I'd absolutely lumped on Liverpool to win this game. Um, and it was on the credit card. Luckily for me, not long after that. So I think if that was Mourinho, it must have been about 2018, 2019 time. And luckily for me, not long after that, they brought a ban in, so you can't gamble with credit cards anymore. Which again was a godsend for me. Luckily for me, with my credit card, I only had like a grand limit on it. Like I say, it was just to get my credit score up. It wasn't to do anything else. It wasn't to buy me a holiday, buy me a house or anything like that. It wasn't anything like that. So luckily for me, it was only a grand, but I maxed that grand out pretty quickly. And yeah, and obviously then after that, it's the interest that adds on top of that, paying that off. I got in a bit of an overdraft as well at one point. Not massive amounts, maybe like a few £100s. But obviously, when you live in your overdraft, trying to pay it back and then live as normal as well, it can just get very messy. And I got myself into a right mess when it was at its worst. I was in, yeah, I got in a lot of debt, I would say.
Um, you were talking earlier, mate, about how you would have money on certain games and that, and then obviously you say you're saying a Saturday and it'd be games at different times or a Sunday or whatever different times. And the thing is with people like myself and you mate, is when you've got that gambling addiction, when you've got that compulsion to do it, you'll start off with it. So a normal person, right, would put on a bet in the morning, and if that bet lost, they would go, you know, you know, they would just give up and go, right, well, lick their wounds. That's the phrase I was looking for there. Lick their wounds and get on with it, and no bet to the following day or the following week or whatever. Are you like me, mate, where if that loss would turn into a chase, the next one you chase it, you chase it, you chase it all day. Before you know it, you're gambling on things, in the middle of the night and stuff. Was it the same for you, mate? We are just constantly chasing your losses.
Yeah, I was a big chaser. I was a big chaser of losses. I would spend, I would say, so let's just put it into a weekend, but I'd be betting through the week as well. But Friday night, I'd be looking at the games for Saturday. I'd put my bets on for Saturday, Friday night, and then I'd be like, right, that's my bets done. Right, I'd just be like, right. So I would leave them, and then Saturday would start. You'd have the early kickoff. If you were ever stupid enough, like myself, to back the early kickoff sometimes, and then the early kickoff lets you down because it always does. And then you're like, right, well, that bet's down. I need to go back on now and get that money back. So then I'd spend the whole of the Saturday afternoon watching Jeff Stelling on the TV, bringing the results in, and me, right, next scorer, both teams to score in the first half, next goal scorer, all that stuff. And before you know it, yeah, hundreds of pounds down on the Saturday. So then Saturday night, you are spending it trying to think, how am I going to win this money back on the Sunday? And honestly, especially towards the end, before I finished betting and stuff, it'd be it'd be a relief on a Sunday night when I've got nothing left to bet with because I could finally sleep. It would feel just like a weight off my shoulders. Sunday would be a case of trying to just make the money back from the Saturday. Some days I would do that, I'd be like, right, okay, I've made my money back. I'd be like, right, so that's Saturday's money sorted. I would have a go on the Sunday, but then I'd lose again. And it'd just be, yeah. And then I would only keep gambling till I've got nothing left to gamble with. And then eventually I could rest my head on a Sunday night and be like, right, okay. But then you've got to face the entire week with no money after that and trying to go to work on a Monday morning after you've just lost probably, again, on a bad weekend, probably a grand or two on a weekend's football, especially towards the end. I would be getting paid on the Friday. And by the end of the weekend, my whole payday had be gone by the Sunday night.
And honestly, I can just, again, I'll just say this throughout this podcast, I can totally relate, because it just shows you what you're talking about there, though, that it's a relief when you've lost your money. It just shows you that it's not about the money. See, when you're doing it, mate, it's nothing to do with the money. It's to do with the thrill, the chase, And in fact, some people even say, some experts out there say that guys like us are addicted to losing. We're addicted to the losses because then I don't actually know why. Apparently, it's the same kind of feeling as if you win. And the thing is, it's like I totally agree with that. It's a relief. It just shows you that for me anyway, mate. When I was in the real depths of it, money meant nothing to me. It meant absolutely nothing. It was like don't get 50 quid, 100 quid, 200 quid. Who cares? Do you know what I mean? And you don't even think of what else could I buy, what else could I have bought with that, what else could I have with, and so how is we'll go back to obviously back then as well, mate, but I want to know what life is like for you now. Obviously you made your last bet in April 23rd 2023, over 2.5 years ago, mate. Just want to say absolutely amazing, man. Well done to you, man. I'm proud of you. You're a legend. It's not just for the fact of that, it's you're smashing life as well with your podcast and everything, and you're putting the message out there and that. So, 2.5 years, mate. What is life like now that you don't gamble?
Yeah, well, thanks for that, mate. Like I say, for me, once I decided to make the change, I remember the game, I remember the day. I was sat in my living room. Man United were playing Brighton, FA Cup semi-final. As you know, I've been on here talked about the three Bs that always beat Man United all the time. I lumped all my wages on Brighton winning that game, whether it was just in overall, not just in 90 minutes, because it was a cup semi. I think it went to penalties. Victor Lindelof scored the winning penalty. Got us to the cup final. I should have been overjoyed. Should have been absolutely buzzing. I'd lost all my money. I was looking in the mirror, on just looking at myself, thinking this cannot continue. So I remember I spoke to my mum straight away, and then I told my dad, all the people I was closest to in the world. I told them. No one was surprised. Like I say, they kind of said they were like, well, we kind of knew, but we didn't know how to approach it. We didn't know if you were going to take it well, if if we said, "Oh, Dan, we think you've got a gambling problem, you need to get help," how would I react to that? We said that we kind of needed you to come to that realization yourself, which I appreciated, because I do think with addiction in particular, you do kind of need to come to the realization yourself that you need help. You can have people doing interventions and telling you need help, but until you fully acknowledge that you've got a problem and you've got an issue and you need to get help, I don't think you can fully take that step. That would be one bit of advice I would give to anybody who thinks they might have a problem. Acknowledge it with yourself first, acknowledge it with your conscience, acknowledge that you need help, you're not too proud. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's not, people get stuck in this in every single day of their lives. People are getting stuck in this. The numbers are on the rise. We'll talk about it a bit later on, but it's all by design as well, which is something I've learned uh, through my podcast and things like that. But for me, it started with I needed to rebuild trust. Needed to. I told my, like I said, I told all the people I was closest to that I'd lied to them. I hadn't been fully honest and things like that. Had to build trust back, which took a long time. I remember like a couple of times saying I was going out somewhere. My mum would be like asking me like, "Well, where you going? What you doing?" And bear in mind at this point I'm like 34, and I'm like, "Don't worry." I said, "Keep my card." I just like I'd go for like watch the football with my mates. I'd just take cash. I'd leave my card at home. I wouldn't take that risk. Things like that, building that trust back so they could trust me again. Which, again, I think after 2.5 years, I do think I've earned it back now. But it was a long road. It was a long road to get them to trust words that came out of my mouth when I've been lying to them for so long. Paying debts back. I got out my overdraft. I paid off my credit card. I think I worked it out. Overall, over the years that I'd gambled, I reckon I lost about 50 grand over the course of maybe 15 years, I would say. Somewhere between 15 and 20 years of betting, about 50 grand. And then just trying to, like I say, find my way again. And 6 months or so into my recovery, I was like, right, how can I? Because anyone who's been through recovery, you kind of get to a point where it's like, right, how do I channel that lust that I had for gambling? How can I channel them emotions into something more positive? So I was like, right, how can I help people not go through what I've been through? Because the way I went through it, I would never wish that on anybody. If it wasn't for my family and Gamban, the app that I installed on my phone, if it wasn't for them, I don't think I'd be here right now. I'll be honest. I was getting into such a spiral that I just couldn't see a way out. So, like I say, that first year in particular was so tough, but the most rewarding because once I started my podcast and then I was meeting people, speaking to people that had been in a similar situation, people who had been through what I'd been through, and then I had people I'd known for years that messaged me out the blue that live in my area. That were all like, "I'm struggling with gambling. Can you help me, Dan?" So I would meet them, down the pub. I'd go down. I'd be like, "Right, what do you want to do?" So I'd do what I'd done with them. I'd download Gamban, which is what I did. I'd be like, right, need to tell your family, acknowledge it, all that kind of stuff. And there was about 4 or 5 lads in one go, probably in the space of a couple of months in the summer of 2023, that reached out to me that I'd known for the better part of 20 years, that all had a gambling problem, but no one knew what to do. And because I'd spoke up, they felt comfortable to come to me. I still stay in touch with them lads now. They give me updates. They're all in recovery, and they're all about 2 years or so now, and that's the most rewarding thing for me, being able to help people in their recovery and get through what I've been through as well.
It's extremely brave, mate, because I never, still to this day, I've no told my family what I went through. You know, I'll say it on here because my mum and my sisters not they're not into football, so they'll not be watching this, so I can talk about it, mate. And I'm round the other side of it now, but do you know? I don't know how you felt, mate, right? But do you know one of the reasons why I never told my mum and my family, my dad, and that is because no, really through shame or what would they thinking or that. It was actually because I thought to myself, if they find out, then I can't gamble anymore. That's what I used to think. If my family find out, and then I will feel that shame,
Mm.
and then I'll be like, that means on a Saturday and a Sunday I can't bet. you know, and the rest of my life and all that. That's how bad I was thinking, mate.
Yeah, and I totally get it, mate. Honestly, like I say, it's not a term of like, when you say feel ashamed, it's not you're ashamed of yourself. It's you're ashamed of what the addiction's done to you. So like I remember saying to my mum and that, I was like, it's the addiction that's took over me. And the one thing I always say, the one thing I've learned through the podcast, I've watched a lot of documentaries. There's been people I've spoke to on the podcast, and it's all by design. They are designed, these companies, to get into your brain, get into your psyche, work out what makes you tick. That's why you get these emails for free bets, free spins, entice you back in. And then, like we've said about our love for football and stuff, the Premier League now, over 50% of the Premier League teams are sponsored by gambling companies. You've got gambling adverts relentlessly throughout games. It took me a long time to actually sit and watch a full Premier League game again when I'd stopped. And even now, I found a lot of comfort in non-league football rather than Premier League football. I'll watch Man United games. I'll maybe watch some of the bigger games. So say it's like Liverpool, Arsenal, something like that. But in general, now, as you've seen, anyways, Jamie, like I do a National League podcast. I follow my local team, Carlisle United, and I do stuff like that now because it's not as in your face. Don't get me wrong, there's still, gambling issues here and there, but it's nowhere near as rife as it is in modern Premier League football.
What about, obviously it has been 2.5 years, mate, but do you still get temptations? And if you do, how do you deal with them?
Yeah, I think the temptations will always be there because I think that gamble is still in the back of my brain. I think he's still there. I'm well aware of that. There's sometimes I'll see things. So, like last season was one where, I don't know if you remember, Plymouth beat Liverpool in the FA Cup.
Yeah.
And I remember the first thing I did was think, oh, I wonder what price Plymouth were. Like just little things like that. But I would never act on it, I don't think. But I would never, again, never say never because you just don't know. But I've been through some tough times over the last year. I lost my mum. I've been through some hardships myself. And normally when they happen, that would be when I would revert back to my type, which would be gambling to take the distraction and take the pain away and stuff. I haven't done that. So I firmly believe if I can get through that, there's nothing tougher than losing a loved one. And if you can get through that and not revert back to it, I think I'd be able to comfortably not do it. But I'm always aware that it's still there in the back of my brain sometimes.
Definitely, mate. And obviously, as you say, like there's loads and loads of advertisement for it now. What do you think needs to change in that kind of anyway? Do you think that anything should be done better?
Yeah, I mean, the issue, I do a lot of campaigning through my podcast. Anyone who's watching this that's maybe listened would know what I'm talking about, but I've done a bit of campaigning with Matt, who owns Gamban, Will, who does a coalition to end gambling ads. I've had them on my podcast, two proper leaders in terms of gambling reform in this country. The issue is that the laws aren't fit for purpose. The gambling laws were written in 2005 by a Labour government and it hasn't been touched since. So we are currently fighting for reform in that, trying to get, modernized because in 2005, if you think technology's come a long way, yeah, we had phones back then, but we didn't have smartphones with, websites and Facebook and everything like back then. I think too that I'm trying to think 2005. I'm sure it was like we just discovered we could take photos on our phone in 2005. So I think for me it needs to start there. It needs to start with the laws. Jackie Alden, who I've had on my podcast, she campaigns every day around slot machines because her mum, who was suffering from terminal cancer, she lost her money in a casino shop. They were making her feel welcome, giving her food, giving her drink, encouraging her to stay there, the mum. And in the end, her mum died and she'd lost all the money. Jackie now is fighting for that. Like I say, there's a lot to be done, but it's because the laws are so lax that these big money casinos, these big money betting companies can get away with it. I seen an article the other day. Betfred was saying about if they're going to hike the gambling tax, that they're going to close all their shops. Biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard in my life. Anyone who's been in a betting shop, betting shops now are empty, unless it's maybe some older gentlemen that maybe can't do it on their phone or whatever. But in general, it's all on your phone now. So if they did close their shops, they're not going to feel that in their pocket. So they're getting no sympathy from me. Like I say, it's all by design. They earn a massive amount, and when they do get found to be breaching, certain things, certain laws, they get a fine. That's basically a slap on the wrist. They'll get fined maybe a few £100,000. That's like it's not even a day's earnings for their company. And for me, it's like there's little things like, so Everton are sponsored by Steak. I don't know if you remember, there was like a social media thing a little while ago where people were posting videos and it had Steak at the bottom. It was they had like porn stars doing the adverts for them and things like that. And Steak now don't have a license to gamble in this country. But because the laws are so lax and ridiculous, to be fair, they have now got round it because they have like jumped on the back of another gambling company that are licensed in this country. So they are allowed to sponsor Everton. They're allowed to have their name everywhere, even though they technically don't have a license in this country. And like I say, it's because it's not necessarily even their fault. It's the laws, the people who wrote the laws. So hopefully, I know I went around it the long way, but hopefully, to answer your question, we're going to write the laws, get new laws written. It's going to take a long time because there's so many people pushing back against it. But hopefully, at some point, we will get some new laws written that will protect more people.
Come back to yourself, mate, about the money and stuff, and obviously not gambling anymore. Do you feel that your mental health has improved since you've stopped gambling? As in, you can look at your bank account now and no feel ashamed or whatever. Because back then, when I'm just going back to myself again, I used to think to myself, why am I so low and all that? See, like a few days later, do you know what I mean? Why am I? Because I've got no money, and you don't realise just the impact that has on your mental health. Again, when you're gambling, this is just from my point of view, mate. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but again, when I'm gambling, it was always, I don't care about money, I don't care about money until you've got none. And then and then a few days later it hits you and you're like, so mate, first of all, does it improve your mental health? And second of all, what's your relationship with money like now? As in, like, when you look at your bank account, do you feel that love for money again? Like you actually, again, like when you're gambling, you don't care about it. Do you care more about money now as well?
Yeah, so mental health wise, I would say when I gambled, I hated everything about myself. I hated the fact that how it made me feel. I hated the fact of obviously what we've talked about, what it made me do, things like that. So yeah, mental health wise, definitely improvement. I think again we all struggle day to day sometimes, but it's compared to when I was gambling, it's night and day difference, night and day. In terms of money, yeah, and I feel like I can enjoy my money more. I touched on earlier about missing out on family holidays, family trips. I missed my cousin's wedding in Portugal because I couldn't afford to go. Things like that. And for me now, it's all about family. It's all about spending it with the people you love. That's what life's about, isn't it? But you lose sight of that because of the addiction. You lose sight of it. All you're thinking about is your next bet. You're not thinking about your family. Like I say, I lost my mum. That's really hammered home to me how important life is, how important love is, how important family is. So for me, now I can have multiple holidays a year now, not necessarily massive exciting ones, but at one point I couldn't do any. Like I've got 3 booked for next year. Just like some of
Wow.
them are city breaks. They're not like big holidays, but just trips. But even then I wouldn't have been able to even afford Blackpool for the weekend when I was gambling. And now I look and I go, I can have a holiday. I don't have to worry too much about where I'm getting that money from for that holiday. I can just be like, right, that money's there. I'm not going to touch it. It's going to be there. I'll just save it for the holiday and it's there. Whereas I would do that in the past, but then that money sat there would be in the back of my mind, and I'll be like, I'll just bet that instead, and I'll make it back up, something like that. So yeah, it's improved my relationship with money, but it's also improved my relationship with life. I would say it's gave me real perspective of how much of a dark hole you can get yourself in, and if you can get yourself out of it, I'm living proof that I'm still not perfect. I'm far from it, but you can get there. We can all support each other. We can all help each other. There's no there's no stigma as far as I'm concerned. I'll talk about anything with anyone. I've got nothing to hide. That's why I come on and talk about these things, because it's important, because there is a lot of people out there that won't want to talk about it or don't know how to express it in sentences and words and things like that. So, like I say, I'm here. If anyone ever wanted to talk, I'm always there. DM, that, Jamie. You've messaged me numerous times, and we've chatted and stuff. I'm online pretty regular. I was like, so if anyone ever thought they wanted to reach out, listen to my podcast, give me a message, and I can put you on to Gamban, the people that have helped me over the last couple of years. And it changes your life. It really does. It's revolutionary.
Definitely, mate. I can vouch for that. That you're a great person to reach out to whenever you need anything. So I would recommend, if anybody's struggling, give Dan a shout, because he'll definitely help you out. But Dan, obviously, we've spoken about a lot of the negatives gambling, and obviously there is. But is there a one, mate, that you can remember that? Because obviously, when I look back as well, I remember some euphoric wins that, we can't be are unmatched to another kind of feeling, to be honest with you. It's not just the feeling of that bet winning. It's like the whole day, the age you were when you were. So is there anything that you can remember that stands out to you there, mate?
Yeah, it's so weird, right? Because I sit here and I'll tell you all the negatives and everything like that. But some of my best memories are days with my mates at the races. So the best win I had was Carlisle races. I think it was me and five lads who were out on the drink. This was when I used to drink, and we'd had a few bets on, and I remember we'd put them on in the bookies on the way up. And I remember going there, they'd all won. But obviously, with them bets, when it's like multiple, you can't quite work out how much you get paid. It wasn't online, so it doesn't tell you. So I remember we got pretty boozy, let's just say. We left, it was pouring down, we were soaked. We thought we'll nip in the bookies on the way home and find out how much we won. So we went in, gave the woman the slip, and she goes, "Oh," and looked, and we were like, "Oh, have we not won?" And she goes, "No, no, you've won." I was like, "All right." And then she went, "I just need to get the keys to the safe." I was like, "Right, okay."
Oh, wow. Right.
Right. And then I was like, "Right, okay." Obviously, we were all boozy at this point, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was something around 8 to 10 grand between five of us. I think we won. And it was incredible. Like, it was such a great feeling. But like, I remember it, even though I was drunk, but I remember it, and it was such a good feeling. But something tells me I probably lost that 2,000-ish pound that I won. I probably lost it the next day or the weekend after. And that's the ultimate lesson, that you never win really in the long run. You get them euphoric feelings, and it's that the key word is dopamine hit. You get the dopamine, and it's that feeling. So if you can get that dopamine hit from something else, so what I do now is I do a lot of walking, get a bit of fresh air. I just, it doesn't have to be far, but just any day where I'm just a bit in the house at a loose end, I think, right, I'm just going to go for a walk down the park, 30 minutes, bit of exercise, bit of fresh air. That gives you a dopamine hit in itself. And just finding ways to get that hit still, but in a better fashion than gambling.
Yeah, mate, totally agree. My euphoric moment wasn't just a bet, a single bet, mate. It was actually over a weekend.
Mm.
So what happened was, again, as you say, mate, whenever you win, it's like, just go straight back to the bookie, just go straight back. So this was obviously before the phones, it was all on your phones and stuff, right? So basically every night, mate, after I finished my work, I get dropped off the bus stop, and there was a bookies right there. So I was getting there every single night, right? And I was playing roulette. And the thing is, at that point as well, Dan, right? So I was like maybe 19, 20 at that point. I stayed with my mum, and I had money, I had money. The worst thing you can do have when you're a gambler, a compulsive gambler, is have loads of money. So I did have loads of money, right? Obviously, didn't have the expenses I've got now. So anyway, I was getting into the bookies every night, and I was playing roulette, and you're putting 20 in, 20 in, 20 in. So one time I goes in Friday night, and I'll forget it. Goes in, puts 20 in, ended up getting up to £800, right? So I was like, I'm taking that. Took the £800, went home. Remember, obviously it was all in cash, putting it all over my bed, thinking I'm rich. You know what I mean? And it was actually that weekend that it was in the Grand National. So that was on the Friday, as I say. Grand National was on the Saturday. So the next day, I'm feeling rich again, so I'm going down to the bookies, because down to the bookies, remember, it was a pure lovely day, goes in, and at that time, I'm not really sure what it's like now, as I don't go to the bookies, but at the Grand National Day, they had like people there who were
Yeah,
handing out leaflets and stuff and showing you how to bet it and all that, right? So I had £20 on me, and I was like, I'm going to bet 4 horses, fiver each. So didn't look at any prices or anything like that. Just the how people do that. They just like the name of the horse or whatever. So I just bet 4 horses. Went over at the counter, put a coupon on, 6 teams, £20. So it goes up the road, the same as yourself, mate. Jeff Sterling's Soccer Saturday. That was one of my biggest things as well. 6 teams on, and I remember it was just the final scores were coming in about 5 minutes before the Grand National was starting. So puts it on, and I was waiting on Burnley. So I was waiting on Burnley, right, and it was like the 94th minute. I was like, this isn't going to happen, man. This isn't going to, and it was like for £400, right? So I was like, it just isn't going to happen. I was like, I've had my luck this weekend and all that. And as I was saying that, Burnley scored, right? So I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Brilliant. Again, 19-year-olds, like, I'm definitely going out right now. That's it. No, that's me. I'm not saving this money. I'm going out. Grand National sits and watches the Grand National, not even caring anymore, mate, because I've got all this money in my pocket, right? And I'm like, don't even care if this comes in. If it comes in, it will only be like 50 quid or something anyway. And I don't know if you remember it, mate, but it was the year Mon Mamé won. And it was a pretty big deal at the time. And it's
yeah.
like, oh, I was like,
I'm
I've
trying.
got that.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember the year. I can't
I think it
remember,
was
but
I think it was 2005 if I'm
yeah, around there. Yeah, I
I
do
think it was
vaguely remember. Yeah.
I was 19, I'm sure it was 2005, mate.
Mm.
And so I'm like, Mon Mamé, like the commentators getting off his head and all that. And I'm like, I have got that one. I obviously didn't realise the price at the time. And it came up 100 to 1. And I just remember my mum shouting, that's 100 to 1, that's 100. I was like, what does that mean? Because I didn't even know what that meant at that point. She's like, you've won 500, or what was it, 500 quid? You've won 500 quid. I was like, oh my God, man. And it was just, but then that was the one weekend, mate. And I think for the next 100 weekends, I'd gave it all back and then times 100. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's the thing, mate. It's like, you can think of these euphoric moments, and I'm the same as you. You think of them, and it's like some of the great times and that, but nobody ever tells you their losses, man.
No, I used to work with a guy in my previous jobs. He would come in on a Monday and you would know if he'd won or lost on the weekend. He'd come in and show you his wins. But what he didn't know was obviously I was secretly gambling probably as much as he was. So I'd be looking through when he showed me. He's like, oh, look at this win, look at this win. But the amount of reds that were coming down that he'd lost. And I'm just like, yeah, I was like, good for you, mate. But I was like, yeah, I didn't mention it, but I was just like, yeah,
Aye.
you can tell because, like I say, people don't tell you about the losses. You just reminded me there of a weekend I had where I used to follow Carlisle home and away quite a lot, like probably from about 2005 ish to about 2010. I'd go to most home and away. And I remember we played Sheffield Wednesday away. I think was that 2010. I think it was 2010 ish. And we were like 12 to 1 to win that game because obviously Sheffield Wednesday, a good side. Carlisle were in League One, punching above their weight. And I remember just having money on Carlisle to beat Sheff Wed, and we won 1-0. So I got back on the bus. I was buzzing with that, and I had both teams to score on. So as you do, check through the scores when you get back on the bus. And there was a game that was 0-0, and I thought, oh well, that's the end of that. I can't remember who the teams were, but I remember the guy who scored it, Leon Clark. Do you remember Leon Clark?
No,
Bit of an EFL legend.
mm-hmm.
I've got a feeling it was maybe like Colchester. I'm not sure. But anyways, it was 0-0 and they had a man down injured. So one of the other team scored while they were down injured. And then they had a bit of a kick-off, bit of an argument. And anyways, they let Leon Clark run from the halfway line and equalise in the other end and that got my bet in, and I'm like, Jesus Christ! I was like, that's my luck. That I was like, I'm happy with that. But again, the Sunday, I'd have lost it all again. By the time I went and collected it from the shop, I'd have lost it all again. But I do say, as much as it ruined my life and things like that, I do look back sometimes with rose tinted glasses, and I'll be like, remember that day? Remember that day? I remember that horse winning as well, because I'm sure Carlisle were playing Leicester away in that day. And I'm sure I was there in the away end. Scott Dobie last minute equaliser at Leicester. I remember that game. That was when Leicester were obviously, well, I mean, no, they're in the Championship, but I think they were in League One at that point.
Aye, mate, I know it's mad to look back on these times and that, but you know, if any young person's watching this, you know, that might be a euphoric moment for me and Dan, but we would trade them in. I would trade every euphoric moment, which has not been many of them, for never walking into a bookies or downloading a fucking gambling app ever, mate, because you know, I've been, like I said to you on your podcast, mate, I've been at my work now for over 21 years. And see if I was sensible for the day that I started in there at 17-year-old, see if I'd have just saved some money and, you know, I could walk out of there. I reckon I could walk out of it. Do you know what I mean? See if I'd just saved £100 a week, which I could have easily done back then. You know, mate, I could just walk if I was fed up with it. You know what? Right, I'm going to go do something else now. But unfortunately, and it is because of my gambling, because I've never really had an addiction to shopping or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? Or anything else. It's just been gambling, mate. And you know, I would trade any kind of 3, 4 euphoric moments I've ever had for never ever putting a bet on in my life.
Yeah, well, I mean, how I would put it to anyone listening would be, if you've gambled for 20 years, pretty much like I did, and I can count on one hand how many good moments I had in 20 years, that kind of tells you the story. I can definitely tell you the amount of times I've laid on my bed on a Monday morning trying to get up for work, knowing that I've lost all my money and I've got a whole month to go before I get paid again, and I've got to face the day somehow and lie to people and tell them that, you know, that I just can't afford to go to things because I'm saving money or something like that. Honestly, I was like, those odd euphoric moments are a flash in the pan. The passes, the come and go as quick as they go. You know, it's something that you can look back at and go, I enjoyed that at the time, but deep down, it just made you worse. It got you more involved in it, entangled in it, and it's something that, like I say, once you get out of it and you can kind of see it a bit clearer, I think you do kind of start to see it for what it is. And like saying that, the people that I've been like podcasting with, working with, you know, they kind of open your eyes to what the gambling industry is. And there was an interesting bit with Russell Howard on a documentary he done, and he, you know, he does like Mock the Week and stuff like that. It was a clip of him from a few years ago, and he was saying is that these betting adverts, you know, that's got Ray Winston on, or like some celebrity telling you what the best odds are. He said the advert should be these women in Las Vegas in incontinence pants that don't want to leave their seat because they're on a lucky streak and they don't want to lose the seat and don't want to get up and go to the toilet instead. And I was like, and that is the truth. That is the truth of addiction. If you think you're on a lucky streak, I remember a couple of times I don't want to move off the couch because I'm on a lucky streak. I don't want to move position on the chair. I'm like, right, if I move a muscle, my lucky run's gone, you know, and it's like that's how much it takes over your brain. And it does take a lot to get that, you know, that clear thinking back. Like I say, I'm still a work in progress myself. I'm far from perfect. But 2.5 years on and I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
And I just want to point out to people who are watching and stuff that, you know, if you've got a problem, me and Dan have obviously sat here and, you know, we're being honest about how we've lost a lot of money, we've lost a lot of years, you know, to gambling and stuff. But actually, we are actually two of the lucky ones, because there's people out there, guys, who have stole from family, stole from friends, stole from their work, you know, robbed people, you know, done things that are really, really shameful. Me and Dan have just kind of been stupid and, you know, caught up in gambling addictions, and not, you know, there's people who have committed suicide over this stuff. So I just want to point out that, you know, as bad as the stories that we're telling here is, that we're lucky ones. So if my advice is just stop, just go and speak to somebody, anybody, whether it's just somebody you trust. I don't know, have you ever been to Gamblers Anonymous, Dan?
I went to one. It wasn't really for me, but I would recommend it. I would always say try it. That's why when I went and it was like, I'll give it a go. But for me, when I went, I was already kind of quite far on in my recovery. I think if it was the first thing I did, it might have worked a bit better for me. But because I'd already kind of reached out to people, got the app installed on my phone, things like that before I went, I think I was okay. But if that had been my first port of call, I think it would have been amazing. So I would always say I would always recommend it. It might not be for you, but being around people and reaching out to people that have been through it or going through it will always be better than people that maybe don't quite understand. And then sometimes you do need that maybe tough love as well. You don't just want people that's going to tell you, it's okay, Dan, it's okay. You sometimes need people to tell you, look, you have messed up, you have made a mistake. I'm a firm believer in that you can't just have yes people around all the time. You've got to have somebody who tells you how it is. I like to think maybe I'm that friend for my friends. I sometimes tell them some home truths that they maybe don't like. But I would like to think that people would do that for me as well. I don't want people just to blow smoke, up my ass and things like that. I want people to tell me how it is. And when I finished my gambling and quit that and stopped that and all that and started the podcast and stuff, I got criticism. I got a bit of abuse online, coming out and talking about my story, things like that. I remember one guy telling me, "Oh, what does he want? Sympathy? Does he want us to set up a GoFundMe page?" Things like that. I mean, if anyone wants to do a GoFundMe page, feel free. But no, I was like, all I'm doing is sharing my story to help somebody. There's no other motive there whatsoever. If somebody thinks there is one, then that says more about them than it does about me. That if they think I'm sinister enough to have an ulterior motive, then other than just helping people. Um, but like I say, like Jamie says there as well, just reach out. Doesn't have to be family. It doesn't even have to be, someone just if you think you can trust them to tell them. It could be a work colleague, could be, just someone that it won't go any further. As long as a problem shared is a problem halved. And I think the gambling suicide numbers are on the rise. I would recommend anyone who's listening. There's a woman on social media, she's on X, called Annie Ashton. She lost her husband Luke to gambling suicide. She also campaigns for safer gambling. She posts quite a lot of hard hitting stuff. She works with Gambling with Lives, the Big Step. That's a charity that's been set up by bereaved families. Liz and Charles Ritchie, they lost their son. They do a lot of great work of trying to stop sponsorships in football and things like that as well. So there's a lot of people out there, even just to follow on social media for a bit of inspiration. Like-minded people that will point things out, and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've never noticed that." The things that like Gambling with Lives do, they'll post like they'll watch an episode of Match of the Day, and then they'll say, "Did you know that there was 78 different casino companies advertised throughout that 45-minute episode of Match of the Day?" And you're like, "Shit, yeah." I was like I would notice it, but the regular person wouldn't notice it because you're not looking for it. But subliminally, your mind will be picking up all them signs.
Definitely, Sarah was saying that today on Twitter. Sarah on Twitter was saying about how long she's known you, that she's realised that the amount of gambling signs there are out there is just absolutely unbelievable, and you don't realise it. And I replied to her just saying, I was the same. When you are gambling, you don't understand. You don't see it. You don't see it until you stop and you go, right, I've got a problem. And you see it. But if you go back to that comment, mate, about um, somebody saying that you want sympathy and stuff like that. To me, that screams out people who have got their own problems and they don't want to address them. That's what that tells me, mate. Whether his is gambling or whatever, that obviously hit a nerve with him. Nothing to do with you looking for sympathy, and that's hit a nerve with him, because anybody who realizes whether you've got an addiction, if you've not got addiction, that it's real, and that people aren't looking for sympathy, especially guys like yourself, mate, who are out there trying to spread the message to stop other people from going down the road that you've went down. And aye, no, I forget people like that. But so another point I was going to make, man, I can't remember now because I'm too busy ranting. But yeah, aye, that's what it is. That's what it is. You said earlier, mate, about how don't sugarcoat it and all that, and be honest with you. I totally agree with that as well. And another message to anybody who's watching stuff, and I don't want to be harsh, but this is just a fact. You're being selfish. You are being selfish. Like, I know that you're not realising that you're being selfish, but think about it. You're thinking, oh, it's only £50, £100, £200. What else could you do with that money? You could go and treat a family member. You could take somebody out for dinner. You could go and surprise somebody with a gift or whatever. Do you know what I mean? You could save it, but for a rainy day to give to somebody. But at the end of the day, you are being selfish. I was being selfish during my gambling addiction, and but it doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you involved in the addiction. Do you know what I mean? So that
Yeah,
goes for alcoholics and drug addicts and everybody else. Do you know what I mean? Nobody sets out to be that person. Do you know what I mean? It's a spiral. So just have a word with yourself now and go and speak to somebody, and you are being selfish. So think about
yeah. The thing is as well, I would say, is the selfishness side of it. Addiction makes you selfish,
that.
but
Yes.
it's not the person that's being selfish. It's the
Yeah.
addiction. And I've the one thing I've learned is that it's as much an illness as anything else. You're not in your right mind. You're not in the right frame of mind. You're not thinking clearly, so you will make decisions based on the addiction. You won't make it based on life. So don't think that Jamie's calling you selfish.
No.
Think that it's the addiction that's making you selfish. Like the biggest rewarding things that I would say for me was once I'd finished gambling. My mum got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer not long after, and I managed to take her on trips, take her on holidays, buy her gifts. The last year of her life, I managed to make as good as possible in the circumstances, me and my sister. But if that had been a couple of years earlier, I wouldn't have been able to afford anything, to do anything with her or anything like that. And I am very grateful that, I got that year with my mum to see her get my shit together, get my life together, see the good that I was trying to do. And, it's that thing of, at least you got to see that. The situation was horrible, but at least she got to see that, and she got to see that I wasn't that same selfish guy that she'd known for a long time, that was just looking out for himself, looking for his next bet. She got to see that. So the biggest reward, I would say, would be is when you can be like, right, I've got extra money now, I can do things to look after my family, pay for nice trips. I remember my mum we had a 60th birthday. We all paid for all the family to go for like a nice afternoon tea, get together. Our family, it's quite a big family, so we don't always quite get together because there's too many of us. But we literally managed to ship everybody in, got everybody together, and it was my mum's last birthday, sadly, but she got to have a good one, and that was because I wasn't being selfish, and I knew what to do with my money. I was spending it wisely. I got to do them things. So don't put it off. If you think you've even got a slight problem, it doesn't have to be that you're skint all the time. If you are potentially lying to your loved one, saying you've got money for bills, but you've maybe borrowed 10 out of that £200 bill money, and you've not told somebody, that could be the start. It can spiral very quickly. So if you're lying to someone, or you're gambling more than you can afford, even if that's just £5 more than you can afford, and you're having to make that £5 back up, it can all be signs. So I would, again, try and catch it as early as possible, rather than getting into 50 grand's worth of debt. In my case, there's people, like Jamie said, that have robbed people, um, stole from, like, possessions from people who've lost people to suicide. Don't let it get to that point. If you can, try and get the help early on. Try and stop it before it gets too bad, because some people aren't as lucky as what me and Jamie are, and you don't come out the other side.
Definitely, mate. And I just want to reiterate that I wasn't. I totally get what you're saying, mate. I wasn't actually calling anybody selfish. I was just saying that
Hmm.
addiction, as Dan says, the addiction makes you like that. I don't consider myself a selfish person. I love, spoiling people and all that. But there was many, many years I was being selfish. You know,
Hmm.
and so I definitely,
No,
I'm no
same
sorry
here, mate.
person.
Same here.
Aye, aye.
Same here.
Definitely, mate. And another thing I would recommend is listening to podcasts, like loads of gambling podcasts. Obviously, you say, mate, you've mentioned a few people. I want to mention Rob on YouTube, who does One Day at a Time podcast. I listen to his
Yeah.
podcasts all the time. I think that he's brilliant at what he does. He's a recovering gambling addict. He has loads of gamblers on as well. An American boy who's really, really good at it. Obviously, be the best version of yourself. Go and give that a watch, and just do everything possible to get away from this horrible illness, man.
Yeah, there's like I say, there's so many people on social media. Obviously, Rob that Jamie's mentioned, Annie who I mentioned, Matt Zab cousin owns Gamban, which is the software that you can install on your phones and devices that stops you getting on these websites. They sponsor my podcast. They've been massive supports for me. Will Prohaska, absolutely one of the leads in reform gambling, trying to sort the gambling ads out. And then another one that I'm getting on my podcast, hopefully at some point in the future, Darren Crocker. He's another one that he's a recovering gambling addict. He posts quite a lot on social media. I think he's big on Instagram. I think I don't have Instagram anymore, but I think he's big on Instagram. I've seen him on YouTube. Currently trying to get him on my podcast as well. But like I say, just get as many like-minded people on your algorithm as possible. You know, that's what I did at the start. I was like, right, who can I follow? Who can inspire me to, you know, beat this illness? Who can, you know, inspire me to beat this addiction? Who can inspire me to be the best I can be? And those were the first few people I followed, and Jackie Alden as well. Massive supports to me. Even when my mum passed away, getting messages off them, just checking, you know, that I'm okay, I haven't relapsed, things like that. Absolutely outstanding human beings. And again, they're another reason I'm still here today. I probably wouldn't be here without them either.
Definitely, mate. Just before we go, I want to address this comment that Ryan's put up. I don't know if you're still in, Ryan. It was a wee while ago, but as someone who worked in Ladbrokes for 2 years, I can confirm bookies don't care what they're doing. I was actively encouraged to let people continue. So, you know, that just shows you. It just shows you that, you know, they're a business and it's actually designed to make you lose, guys. So, aye.
I think that's the perfect comment to leave it on, mate. To be honest, I don't think I can say it better than Ryan. It's by design. The bookies will always win because it's manufactured that way.
Definitely, mate. Dan, it's always an absolute pleasure to talk to you, mate. I think we got into some real good stuff tonight, mate, and hopefully it helps some people going forward, mate. And also, as I said in your podcast, mate, and your mum will be extremely proud of the man that you are now. You know, you've left that behind you. You're smashing life, and good luck for the future, mate. I'm sure we'll speak again many, many times.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate, and more than happy to come on anytime.
Thanks, Dan. Cheers, everybody.